Hey, how's it going? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be doing a very exciting video because I'm going to be letting you know about the top 10 best thrillers from the last 10 years. And I decided to make this video now, this month, because in the month of February 2025, I'm actually going to be celebrating my 10-year booktube anniversary, and I've officially been making videos now on YouTube for 10 years on this channel, and like that's so crazy to me. So I thought, what better time than to make a list like this of the top 10 thrillers from the last 10 years. So I thought I would make it extra challenging for myself because we're going to be going through the years one by one since 2015. But before we do jump into the video, I just wanted to take a second to thank today's video sponsor, which is Factor, because Factor makes meeting your nutrition goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved meals right to your doorstep. They have a team of gourmet chefs who create each meal using only ingredients with integrity so that you can be feeling your best all day long. I love that with Factor, you know, like they really take the stress out of meal planning and they set you up for success because you can skip the grocery store runs, you can skip the cooking fatigue. You literally just pop this thing into the microwave for 2 minutes and you have a fresh, delicious meal ready to go. I love that with Factor, there's always so much to choose from because every week you have over 35 meal options to choose from, including options like keto, calorie smart, vegan and veggie, and more. You can skip the overpriced takeout trap because Factor is not only cheaper, but it's more delicious. I think for me, the biggest benefit of having Factor is definitely the time I'm able to save with not having to worry about dinner and think about dinner constantly. I love the convenience, you know, of just throwing this in the microwave for 2 minutes and then you have a hot meal ready to go. And the chicken meals that they offer are some of my favorites of all time. Like, they are genuinely so good. The flavor is unreal. And Factor is now owned by HelloFresh, so with a wide variety of meal plans to choose from, there really is something for everyone. I personally love switching between the two brands, and now you can as well at a discount through me. So you can head to factor75.com or click the link down below and use my code 50gabbyreads to get 50% off your first box with Factor as well as free shipping. That's code 50gabbyreads at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get into the books. Okay, so jumping into the top 10 thrillers, you know, this was really hard for me to try and figure out which ones I wanted to include in this video because in any given year in the last 10 years, I've probably read about at least 50 thrillers that have been published in every single year. And according to my Goodreads, I've read nearly 500 thriller or mystery books at this point. So it was really hard for me to try and pick a top 10. And if you were wondering why books like Gone Girl or You are not included on this list, because these are two of my favorite thrillers of all time, well, that would be because both of these books were published before the year of 2015, and that's where we're gonna start. So kicking off this list with my pick from the year of 2015, I think my favorite thriller that came out of the year 2015 has got to be The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. And to this day, I still consider this book to be one of my all-time favorite thrillers. Like, there's really just something about the way that this book is written. This book kind of has that classic, like, strangers on a train trope where, like, two characters meet each other who are strangers and they decide that they're gonna commit murder for each other. I think Peter Swanson is really good at, like, the misdirection thing. You know, like, you think you know where the story's going as the reader, and then you actually don't. Like, you have no idea. And this book is just so much fun, and I will continue to recommend it to this day just because of how much of an impact that it had on me. But another one that came from 2015 that I was also debating having as the pick is gonna be Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This book will go down in history as, like, one of the only thriller books to ever make me cry. Like, I got so emotional over this book. But I also do hesitate to recommend this one super widely because I think Karen Slaughter, she's known for writing some of the most graphic, grotesque, and disturbing thrillers that you've probably ever read in your life. Her thrillers, at least for me, like, they lean into a territory that is very extreme with, like, the violence that is on page, and it's just very graphic and hard to stomach. Like, this is one of those books that is not easy to read, but I also did want to mention this book anyways just because it is so iconic, and it's like one of those stories that, like, I still think about all these years later. So I had to mention Pretty Girls, but if you are going to read this, then, like, brace yourself. It's a tough read. All right, and then the year 2016, I think my favorite thriller that came out of the year of 2016 has got to be The One by John Mars. I do think that this book, The One, is one that really surprised me because this is not just a thriller. It kind of has these, like, sci-fi elements and even some, like, romance elements in this book, because the main premise of this book is that you're following these characters who live in this world where they can take a DNA test to find the one. They can find their soulmate through a DNA test. But then this one ends up turning into a thriller because we're following a bunch of different characters in this book. And there's just some really, really interesting pairings and like things happening in this book. Something that I love about this book is that even though we are following so many characters in this, I never thought that it was too confusing. And I also loved the pacing of this book. Like, it is very fast paced. It is a very quick read, very short chapters. And even though this book is over 400 pages, it just absolutely flies by. And to this day, I still consider it to be one of my all-time favorite thrillers. I think it's definitely my favorite from John Mars. I've enjoyed a few books from this author, but I think this one has got to be my top favorite. I also did want to shout out another thriller that came out in 2016 that I love is this book called I Found You by Lisa Jewell. This one is not my favorite Lisa Jewell, but it's definitely one of my top favorites. And this one, premise-wise, all you need to know is that it's following this woman who lives on this beach, and then one day this man shows up on the beach and he has no memories and he doesn't even know what his own name is. And that's pretty much all you need to know about the story. This one is really good because it has like multiple different timelines and multiple different characters that you're following, so it's a very complex mystery. But I just remember really, really loving this one when I read it, so I had to shout it out. And then from the year 2017, we have one of my all-time favorite thrillers, which is Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. The premise for this book does not even fully capture the madness that is this book, because the premise sounds pretty simplistic, right? I mean, you're following this woman who like one night she hooks up with this man, and then the next day when she goes to work, she realizes like, oh my god, that man is my boss. And then she also happens to like make this new friend when she just moved to this town. She's connecting with this woman, and then she finds out, oh, that woman is the wife of the guy that I just slept with, who is now also my boss. So like, yes, it is a little bit messy. There's some messy romance, especially at the start of this book. This, for me, this is just one of those thrillers that like to this day, there haven't been that many thrillers that have surprised me in the way that this book has. This book just has like the craziest plot twist at the end of it, and you will never see it coming. It's just one of my favorite thriller plot twists of all time, and so like this book has stayed at the top of my thriller list over the years because of how much I love the ending of this book. It's so unhinged. And then from the year 2018, I think my favorite thriller from that year has got to be Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. You know, you might be picking up on the fact that Lisa Jewell is an incredible thriller author, and she's definitely like one of my top favorites, and I think that this book is my ultimate favorite from her, which is so wild to say, you know, because Then She Was Gone, I feel like this thriller is one that's like really special because I don't think that this book is that surprising necessarily. Like, I don't think that this book is that unpredictable, and it is rare, you know, that I would enjoy a thriller so much that I kind of find to be a little bit predictable. And in this story, we're following this woman who like her 15-year-old daughter went missing 10 years ago, and now she starts dating this new guy, and she finds out that this new guy has a daughter, and his daughter looks exactly like her daughter who went missing 15 years ago, but his daughter's only like 5 or 7 years old or something. And in my opinion, this book is just so well written, and I really like emotionally connected to the characters in this story. There's just something about the way that Lisa Jewell writes her books. Like, I just feel immediately emotionally connected and invested in the story. And this one has got to be like one of my top favorites from her, even though I don't think it's the most shocking thriller that I've ever read, but it still stayed on my mind after so many years. Okay, and then next is the year 2019, and this is like truly the year where like thrillers really popped off, I think, because it was so hard for me to try and pick one. I actually have 3 picks for the year of 2019. Like, I'm so sorry, but I cannot choose. Like, these are 3 of my favorite thrillers of all time. Because from 2019, we have The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware, we have The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, and we have Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. And so like, how was I expected to choose between all 3 of these for the year of 2019? Like, these all 3 are some of my favorite thrillers of all time. You know, Lock Every Door by Riley Sager is actually like my favorite book from Riley Sager. He's published so many books now, and this one is still the one that I consider to be my top favorite of all time. I think this book is just so fun. You know, it's so entertaining. It checks a lot of boxes for me with things that I love in thrillers. And this story is about this woman named Jules who is going to be living in this apartment building in New York City, but there's like a lot of weird rules when it comes to living in this building. Like, she can't have any visitors, and she can't stay the night anywhere else. And there's just a lot of weird things going on, and there's a lot of like creepy vibes in this apartment, which is just like my favorite thing ever. So Lock Every Door is a top favorite of mine, but then also The Silent Patient. The Silent Patient, I think to this day has like one of my favorite plot twists that I've ever read at the end of the book. Like, my jaw was like on the floor, like I could not believe. And in this story, we're following this woman named Alicia who is a painter, and she seems to have the perfect life, and then one night her husband gets home and she shoots him in the face 5 times and then stops speaking afterwards, and like nobody knows why she did it. And so that's like the basic premise for this one. I absolutely love this book. I think it's so good. And then of course The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I love this book so much, and it's my favorite Ruth Ware like by far. I've read so many books from Ruth Ware, and like none of them compare to how I feel about this one. And in this story, we're just following this nanny who is going to be nannying these children, and she's going to be taking care of these children in this like smart home that seems like it's haunted or something. Like, there's something weird going on in this home. But this book is really cool because from the beginning of this book, we know that like one of the children die and that she's getting accused of the murder. And so this entire story is like her writing these letters to her lawyer from prison, who's who's gonna be like representing her, and she's like telling the story of like what actually happened. Oh my god, this one is just so good. And this is one of those thrillers that like at the end of it, there are multiple plot twists. Like it's not just like one big thing that you're like, oh shit. No, it's like several things that you're like, oh. If there's something that you're picking up on, or if you're able to predict something about the ending, I guarantee there will be at least one thing that you won't predict about the ending, and I think that's so fun about this book. Okay, and then the year 2020, this was also a really, really great year for thrillers. So I do have a few answers for this one as well. I'm so sorry, but The Guest List by Lucy Foley, this is one of my all-time favorite thrillers. This one kind of is that like classic, you know, like whodunit, Agatha Christie inspired type of vibe, where you're following this entire wedding party and somebody in the wedding party gets killed, and then you're trying to figure out who did it the entire book. But something that I really love about The Guest List is like the freaking atmosphere in this book, because this one takes place on an island in Ireland, and then it also has like the most stormy, like rainy atmosphere to this. Like I don't know, I still remember the atmosphere in this book. I loved that about it so much. But then from 2020, I also have They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. I just had to include this book because this is another one of my all-time favorites, because in this story we are following this English professor named Scarlett, and she's a serial killer and she kills men. On the back of this, it describes it as a feminist serial killer story perfect for fans of Killing Eve. There's a plot twist in this book about halfway through that I will never forget my experience reading that for the first time. Like I was so taken off guard. And then also from the year 2020, I just had to mention Long Bright River by Liz Moore. I mean, this one is technically more of like a literary thriller, kind of slow burn mystery. It's not exactly like an edge of your seat thriller in the way that some of these other books are, but I did want to mention this anyway because this is a book that I've read twice. Like I love this book so much. Like there's just something about it. I think the main thing that works for me about this story in particular is the sister relationship, you know, because our protagonist, the main character that we're following, she is a cop who's working in Philadelphia, and then her sister is a drug addict who goes missing. Shortly after her sister goes missing, there's like a string of murders that start happening in the area where they live, and she starts to get worried about like the fate of her sister. And I think the description on the inside of this book perfectly captures the vibes when it says Long Bright River combines the very best of crime fiction with the emotional intimacy of an unforgettable family drama, because it really is a story about these sisters, you know, because we do get like present day when the sister is missing, but then we also get flashbacks to their childhood. It is one of the most gorgeously written books that I've ever read, and I just had to include it because of how much I freaking love Long Bright River. Okay, and then moving on to the year 2021, this was another year of some really great thrillers, and I think my top favorite from this year has got to be Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. Here we have another thriller that's like one of the only thrillers that have made me cry. Like this book definitely made me cry. It was so emotional and so beautiful. And in this story, we are following these two fathers. One of them is black and one of them is white, but they are both ex-convicts. And we're currently following these characters as they are on a mission to get revenge for their gay sons who were both brutally murdered. And this story was just so well written. It was so good. I think that S.A. Cosby did an amazing job with navigating the difficulties that would be telling a story like this, you know, because both of these dads, like both of the ex-convicts, they did not necessarily approve of their sons being queer. And so like it definitely adds another layer to this story, and the way that S.A. Cosby was like able to write their arc as characters was just so well done in my opinion. I also think there's a lot of really great commentary in this book, you know, about what it means to live in America as a black person versus a white person, and how so often like white people don't even understand the privileges that they have. This one is just one that is very thought-provoking, and it has stuck with me so much throughout the years, and I'm surprised that I love this one as much as I did because I don't always love thrillers that are just based off of revenge. I mean, I don't know, there's definitely a select few that I could point out that I do love, but in general, revenge is a topic in thrillers that doesn't really interest me a whole lot. But there was just something about this, I just felt so emotionally connected to these characters and the story overall. And then some other books that I loved that also came out in 2021, one of them is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. It's just so much fun. This book has like messy romance, there's like love triangles and like things happening on a college campus. One of their friends got murdered and killed in college 10 years ago, and now the reunion is happening 10 years later. All of these people are going to be going back to the college, and then they're going to be trying to find out the truth about what really happened to their friend and who really murdered their friend. It's just so juicy. It's kind of like silly and not nearly as serious as any of these other books that I'm talking about, but I loved this so much. I had the time of my life reading In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. I loved it. And then I also had to mention The Push, which I know this is another one kind of like Long Bright River, where like I don't know if I would necessarily consider this a thriller. I agree with how it describes it actually on the premise here when it says that this is a page-turning psychological drama about the making and breaking of a family. And this one is just a really gruesome story about this woman realizing that maybe like motherhood is not everything that she thought it would be. And this definitely does read like a thriller in a lot of ways just because of what's happening in this book, but I also think it's very slow paced. You know, like this is more of a character study kind of story. I loved this so much and I just had to talk about it because The Push is like one of my all-time favorites. Then from the year of 2022, without a doubt, my favorite thriller from 2022 has got to be Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. This is probably my favorite Alice Feeney book, which is saying a lot because I've really enjoyed a lot of thrillers from Alice Feeney. Daisy Darker is a really fun one because this one, it all takes place on the night of Halloween and it takes place on this island where there's like a storm that's going to be happening. So the stormy vibes are also great in this one. And this is another one that could have been, you know, like inspired by Agatha Christie, where it's kind of like a whodunit and like characters are getting picked off one by one and you're trying to figure out like who is the killer. But this one, to me, it felt very different from all of the other like whodunit mystery thriller kind of books that I've read, because this one just has a really unique twist that I personally didn't see coming. I know some people said like, oh, it was so obvious, or like, oh, I saw that coming. But for me, I did not see it coming and I was completely shocked by the ending of this book. And I also just had such a fun time with it because I just think this is one of those books that feels so well written. It's perfectly paced. It's very intriguing. I love the atmosphere. I love the storminess and like the Halloween vibes. And then also from the year of 2022, I just had to mention Notes on an Execution. And this is another one of those books that like, yes, I don't know if this is exactly a thriller. It feels a little bit more like literary thriller, kind of like slow burning mystery kind of story. And this story is really fascinating because we are following the story of this serial killer who is currently sitting on death row. But then this story is told from the perspective of 3 different women in his life throughout the years. One of the perspectives is like from his mother, and then another perspective is like from the sister of the woman that he ended up falling in love with. And it's just so beyond fascinating. Like, this book is just so well written. It's so thought-provoking. I swear, like, I tabbed and annotated the heck out of this book because there's just so much to digest with what this book is trying to say. All right, and then from the year of 2023, it's gotta be None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I know, isn't it so crazy? Like, I wasn't expecting Lisa Jewell to be the author that was like featured the most on this list, but like Lisa Jewell has been publishing thrillers for a long time and she is still putting out these thrillers that are absolutely amazing. So like, good for Lisa Jewell. None of This Is True is definitely like one of my favorite thrillers from 2023 just because it's so fun. It's so fast paced. Like, I flew through this book in like one afternoon, I'm pretty sure. And this book is one of my favorite books that involves like a podcast element, because I know like a podcast element is like all the rage right now in thrillers, and like almost every single thriller that I know has a podcast element these days. But I do think that this is one of my favorites when it comes to like the inclusion of a podcast. In this story, it starts off so random too because it's just about these 2 women meeting in a restaurant and they both happen to have the same birthday. And they're like, oh, that's weird. And they're turning the exact same age. So they're like, oh, like what are the chances? Like, that's so cool. And they start to connect in that way. And then she finds out that this other woman, she runs this podcast that's kind of like about women and like women's stories. And so she asks if she can be featured on this woman's podcast. In between the chapters, you kind of get sneak peeks at like this Netflix documentary that they made, like a true crime documentary, being like, the birthday twins met each other and then chaos happened. So like, it's kind of teasing you that you know shit's gonna get crazy later on in the book. I just love this so much. Like, I love the way that this book was written. I had so much fun reading this one. And Lisa Jewell just truly, she's like the queen of thrillers for me. Like, I love her writing so much. And then also from 2023, you know, I had to mention Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll, which again, I know this is kind of like Notes on an Execution or like Long Bright River. Yes, it's a little bit more of a literary thriller, even maybe like a historical fiction, like true crime kind of vibe to it. If we're getting technical, I don't know exactly if I would call this one a thriller, but I had to mention it here anyways because of how much I love this and how big of an impact it had on me. Because I feel like this book does a similar thing to what Notes on an Execution also did, but I almost feel like Bright Young Women did it in a way that was even better, because similar to Notes on an Execution, this one is a story about a serial killer, but this story is actually inspired by the real life serial killer that was Ted Bundy. But this one is told from the perspective of the women who were living in the sorority that he attacked. Something that I really love about this book is that the focus is on the women and it's on the survivors, and like the way that this book is told is just so beautiful. He is never mentioned by name, like not even one freaking time in this book, and I love that about this. I love that in this book there is just so much commentary about the language we use when we describe these serial killers and how we're always using this like friendly language, like describing him as being like charming. Can we stop with all of the friendly language when we're talking about these men who are serial killers? Like, it's just disgusting, and I love the way that this book points that out. I just loved everything about this book. I think it's so well written and so well done. And then on to the final year, which is 2024. And you know, it was actually hard for me to choose a book from 2024 because I realized, you know, like I was kind of going through a rut last year with thrillers. I'm not gonna lie, like most of the stuff that I was reading last year in the thriller genre was just not impressing me at all. And I was starting to get to the point where I'm like, oh my god, like have I just seen it all? Like, am I just really burnt out on thrillers right now? Or like, I don't know. All the thrillers that I read in the year of 2024, I don't think I had a single 5-star book for a thriller that was published in the year of 2024, because I did read some thrillers that I gave 5 stars to, but those were published in previous years. And so I think the only book that I rated extremely high in the year of 2024 was Kill for Me, Kill for You, which I ended up giving this one a 4.5 stars. But Kill for Me, Kill for You is another book that I really do love and I highly recommend. This is another one of those books, kind of like The Kind Worth Killing, where it does have the strangers on a train trope where like two strangers meet each other and they decide that they're gonna commit murder for each other. And I have a lot of fun with that trope. Like, clearly it's one of my top favorites. And I just love that so much, and I feel like this story in particular had even more layers to it than I was expecting, because it's not just like these two women meeting in a bar and deciding they're gonna commit murder for each other, but there's also like a third perspective that you're following from this woman named Ruth, who like she gets attacked by this man who's like a serial killer, but then he leaves her alive. And then you're trying to figure out like, why did he leave her alive? Because he's killed every single one of his other victims. And there's like so much more to the story than just the perspective of those two women. So like, it's really interesting. There's a lot happening in this one. 2024 was a good year overall, but I'm just surprised that I didn't have any 5 stars from that year. That's pretty crazy. So hopefully 2025 goes better in terms of the thrillers that I'm reading this year. Yeah, that is going to be a wrap on this video. Those are my top 10 favorite thrillers from the last 10 years. I know some years I cheated. I'm sorry. I had to pick like 2 or 3 because how was I supposed to choose? I would love to know your thoughts on this video. I would love to know if you agree with some of the thrillers that I chose, or like which thrillers you would pick for certain years. I always do love to hear your feedback on things like this because I feel like thrillers are so subjective, you know, and like I love to see what everybody's taste is in thrillers. I'm really hoping that 2025 ends up being a great year for thriller books, you know, because I do feel like we've been a little bit in a drought in the year of 2024, and I'm really hoping that there will be some things this year that come out that really surprise me, so fingers crossed. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I will see you next time with another video. Bye!